Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, a typical evening of casual conversation. The air was warm with the kind of intimacy only a gathering of close friends could bring. People laughed, told jokes, and reminisced about old times. But as the evening wore on, there was one person who didn't quite fit into the fold, the woman sitting at the edge of the group, a glass of wine in her hand, watching the others with quiet eyes. Her name was Emma. She wasn't shy, but she often felt like an outsider in situations like this, always a little too reserved, a little too self-conscious. She wasn't like the others. They were loud and full of life, while she preferred the comfort of silence. "Emma, come on. Why don't you play us something on the piano?" someone called out from across the room. It wasn't the first time they had made this suggestion, but tonight, something about it seemed different. Emma stiffened. She wasn't a pianist. Sure, she had taken lessons as a child, but that was years ago. The thought of sitting at the piano, surrounded by people who were already expecting a joke, made her stomach turn. "Oh, come on, Emma, don't be shy," another voice chimed in, the teasing edge in their tone undeniable. "Give us a tune, it'll be fun." Laughter rippled through the group. Some people grinned, clearly amused by the idea of her fumbling through a song. Others simply waited, unsure if she would agree. Her fingers tightened around her glass. The familiar mix of insecurity and hesitation flooded her chest. She wanted to say no. She wanted to sink into the couch and disappear into the background. But there was something about the way they all looked at her, expecting her to do something ridiculous, that made her stand up, quietly resigning herself to the inevitable. With an uneasy sigh, Emma made her way to the piano. The crowd parted to let her through, their faces still wearing the same amused smiles. She took a seat on the bench, feeling the cold ivory keys beneath her fingers. Her hands hovered for a moment, unsure of where to begin. The teasing whispers in the background faded into a hum as Emma slowly placed her fingers on the keys, unsure of what she was doing. She began to play, tentatively at first, as if testing the waters. A simple, familiar tune that anyone could recognize. But as the first few notes spilled out into the room, something shifted. The sound, soft, almost hesitant at first, grew richer, deeper. Her fingers moved with a fluidity she didn't expect, and suddenly, she wasn't just playing a melody. She was lost in it. Her eyes closed, her body swaying slightly to the rhythm of the music. The notes seemed to come from some deeper place inside of her, somewhere she hadn't been in years, maybe never. Her heart raced, her pulse quickened, and for the first time all evening, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, alive. The room had gone silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, thick with anticipation. Emma's fingers moved faster now, her hands flowing across the keys as if guided by some unseen force. Her breath quickened. Her heart thundered in her chest. And then, it happened. The music reached a crescendo, the notes soaring higher and higher, each one more powerful than the last. She wasn't just playing the piano anymore. She was creating something beyond herself, something that seemed to fill the very air with energy. It was as though the music had become a part of her, flowing through her veins, echoing in her soul. For a moment, she thought she might stop. The self-doubt returned, creeping in around the edges of her mind. What was she doing? Why had she agreed to this? But then she heard it. The faint sound of someone gasping, followed by the stunned silence of everyone in the room. She opened her eyes. They were all staring at her, mouth slightly agape, eyes wide with disbelief. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, just as quickly as it began, the music stopped. The room stayed silent. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. No one clapped. No one spoke. There was only the sound of her own breathing, ragged and shallow, mixing with the eerie stillness of the room. Emma sat there, her fingers resting on the keys, unsure of what had just happened. The power of the music had left her just as suddenly as it had come. What just happened?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to speak, to break the silence. But no one did. The weight of their gaze was suffocating. The teasing smiles had vanished. They were no longer laughing. They were stunned. And for the first time, Emma felt a strange sense of power. But also fear. What had she just unlocked? What was this music? Where had it come from? As she looked at the stunned faces of her friends, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. The night lingered on, but the energy had shifted. The group of friends, once laughing and drinking, now sat in silence, their eyes occasionally flicking to Emma. She could feel the weight of their gaze, and it pressed down on her like a physical force. Her fingers were still tingling from the piano keys, and her heart hadn't slowed since the music stopped. It felt as though something inside her had awakened, something that wasn't supposed to be there. She sat at the piano, unsure whether to leave the room or stay, but before she could make a decision, Clara, her closest friend, walked up to her. Clara had always been the bold one, the one who never hesitated to speak her mind, and tonight was no different. "Emma," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "That was incredible." Emma blinked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "It was just a joke," she said, her voice low. Almost embarrassed. "I wasn't trying to do anything special." Clara shook her head, her expression one of disbelief. "No, Emma. That was not just a joke. That was," she paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "That was something else. It was like, you weren't even playing. It was like the music was playing you." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. It was exactly how she had felt. As if the music had taken over her, pulled her into a trance where she wasn't controlling anything anymore. But how could that be? She had never felt anything like that before. Before she could respond, another voice chimed in. It was Mark, a mutual friend who had always been a bit of a skeptic when it came to things that couldn't be explained logically. "Emma, are you sure you've never played like that before?" Mark asked, his tone tinged with curiosity and something else, something darker. "You've got to admit, that was way beyond anything we were expecting." "I don't know," Emma murmured, her hands now resting on the piano as though it was the only thing grounding her. "It just happened." The group remained silent, the atmosphere growing heavier with every passing second. Emma could feel the tension in the air, and for the first time in her life, she wished she could just vanish. She wasn't sure what had happened, but it felt like something had changed, something she couldn't understand. The whole evening had been surreal, but now, it felt like she was at the center of something far bigger than herself. She stood up from the piano, brushing her palms against her jeans, suddenly feeling restless. "I think I'm going to head home," she said quickly, trying to escape the growing unease in the room. But Clara was quick to stop her. "Emma, wait. Please, let's talk for a minute. Something's going on, and I think you need to understand it." Emma hesitated but then nodded, sitting back down on the couch near the piano, her mind still swirling with confusion. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, but it was Clara's that held her the longest, as though she were trying to piece something together in her mind. "What are you trying to say?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Clara admitted. "But I've seen people play before. I've seen good musicians. Hell, I've seen people who've been playing piano for years. But that was different. It was like, you were channeling something. Something powerful." Emma shook her head. "That's crazy. I've never played like that. I don't even remember most of it." "You were in a trance," Clara continued, leaning in closer. "It was like you were possessed by the music. And there's something else, Emma. I don't know what it is, but something's happening. Emma felt a cold sweat on the back of her neck. The way Clara was looking at her. There was something more than concern in her eyes. There was fear. I'm fine, Emma said, trying to reassure herself more than anyone else. But before she could finish, the front door opened, and in walked Rachel, another close friend. Rachel had been at the other end of the room during Emma's performance, and from the look on her face, she had missed nothing. Emma, Rachel said quietly, her voice strained. You're not going to believe this, but something strange just happened. I've been Googling some things, and I think you need to hear this. The room went quiet as Rachel pulled out her phone and began reading aloud from the screen. There's an old legend, Rachel began, her voice shaky. It's about people who can play music that's not just music. It's said that some people, very few people, are born with a gift, or maybe it's a curse, but they can channel music that moves beyond the physical realm. Emma blinked. What are you talking about? Rachel glanced at her, her eyes wide. It's called the music of the forgotten. There's an ancient belief that certain people can play melodies that resonate with something deep inside us. Something primal. And when they do, the music can heal or destroy, depending on how it's used. The room felt colder suddenly, and Emma's heart raced. You're telling me I have some kind of gift? She asked, incredulous. I don't know, Rachel said, but the description of what you played tonight. It matches what's written here. It's almost like you've tapped into something that no one else can. Emma stood up abruptly, her thoughts spiraling. This is insane, she muttered, pacing the room. This is just a coincidence. I don't even play the piano. But deep down, she knew that what had happened wasn't normal. It wasn't just a coincidence. Something had shifted inside her. Something had awakened. As the night dragged on, Emma found herself retreating to her thoughts. The strange feeling that had overwhelmed her when she played was still with her, gnawing at the edges of her mind. Was there truth in what Rachel had said? Was this just the beginning of something bigger? She couldn't shake the feeling that what had started as a joke was now spiraling into something far more dangerous. The group stayed for a while longer, but Emma's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't focus on the casual chatter around her. The only thing that consumed her thoughts was the music. What had happened to her? Why had the piano seemed to control her? Why had it felt like she was being led by something greater? And as the evening ended and Emma finally walked out into the cool night air, one thought burned in her mind. This was only the beginning. The days after the incident at Clara's party felt like a haze, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her life had changed forever. What was once a typical existence of quiet routines, mundane tasks, and the comfort of anonymity had shifted into something unrecognizable. The music haunted her, a constant presence in the back of her mind. Even now, as she sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at her phone, the echoes of those haunting notes filled her thoughts. She hadn't told anyone about what she had been feeling. Not yet. She wasn't even sure how to explain it. All she knew was that every time she closed her eyes, the music was there, swirling in her mind, demanding to be played again. The thought terrified her. The sensation of being taken over, of having no control over what her fingers played, was unsettling. But it wasn't just that, it was what Clara and Rachel had said. They had both suggested something deeper was at play, something beyond mere talent. Maybe it's nothing, she whispered to herself, trying to dismiss the growing dread that had been creeping up inside her. Maybe I was just nervous. I overplayed it. They were just caught up in the moment. But deep down, Emma knew that wasn't true. The music had felt too real, too powerful. She had tapped into something, and now, she was afraid it was too late to turn back. The following evening, Emma decided to visit Clara. She needed someone to talk to, someone who might understand, even if only a little. Clara had been her best friend for years, always there to listen, even if her advice was sometimes unconventional. As Emma drove to Clara's apartment, she tried to push the fear from her mind. She tried to convince herself that it was just a fleeting moment, that the music wasn't anything more than a strange anomaly that she'd experience once and then forget. But the more she tried to convince herself, the more the music seemed to grow louder in her thoughts. When Clara opened the door, she smiled brightly, though there was a knowing look in her eyes. She had been expecting Emma, and from the way she looked at her, Emma could tell that Clara was already piecing together the mystery of what had happened. "Come on in," Clara said, stepping aside to let her friend into the apartment. "I made tea. I thought you might need it after everything." Emma sat down on the couch, her nerves already on edge. She accepted the cup of tea from Clara but didn't take a sip. Instead, she stared into the steaming liquid, her mind far away. "I don't know what's happening to me," Emma admitted, her voice small. "It's like I'm losing control. The music, it keeps coming back. And when I close my eyes, it's all I hear." Clara set her own cup down and looked at her intently. "Emma, you've been feeling this for days now, haven't you?" Emma nodded. "It's like something's inside me, and I can't stop it. I try to ignore it, but it won't go away." Clara sighed, sitting next to Emma. "I don't know if I can help you, but I think we need to talk about what happened. You felt it too, didn't you? That power, that feeling of something beyond you?" Emma shuddered, the memory of the moment flooding her again. She closed her eyes, trying to block it out, but the notes, the deep, pulsing rhythm, they were there. "I don't know what it was. I've never felt anything like it before." "I know," Clara said gently. "But I think it's something you need to face, Emma. You can't just keep pushing it down. It's not just going to go away. It's part of you now. And maybe it's something you were always meant to do." Emma's stomach turned. The thought of embracing this strange force, whatever it was, terrified her. She had always prided herself on being in control of her life, of her actions. Now, she felt as though she was at the mercy of something she didn't understand. "Clara, I don't want this. I didn't ask for it." Clara took Emma's hand, her expression softening. "I understand. But I think you need to dig deeper, figure out why this is happening. I've been doing some research, and I found something strange." Emma looked up, a flicker of curiosity breaking through her anxiety. "What do you mean?" "I found something about people who channel music," Clara began, her voice trailing off. "It's not just about being a good musician. There are stories, Emma, stories of people who can channel music that's more than just sound. Music that affects the world around them. That makes people feel things. That changes things." Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "You're saying I'm some kind of, what? A sorceress?" "No." Clara laughed nervously, but there was an edge of uncertainty in her voice. "I don't know. I just know that there's something happening to you, and I think it's more than just a coincidence. It's not normal for someone to be able to play like that, not without something else going on." Emma shook her head, disbelieving. "This can't be happening. I'm just a regular person. I have no special powers. This is crazy." Clara leaned forward, her expression serious. "What if I told you that this has happened before? That there are people who've experienced what you're going through?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I don't know the details yet," Clara said, "but I'm going to keep looking. I think there's a reason this is happening. And I think it's connected to something bigger. Something you don't even know about yet." For the next few days, Emma felt herself drawn deeper into the mystery, unable to escape it. Her thoughts were consumed by the music, by Clara's words, and by the sense of unease that had settled in her chest. She couldn't stop playing the piano. Whenever she was alone, her fingers seemed to move of their own accord. But every time she played, it felt like she was tapping into something darker. The notes would spill from her fingers, and it was as if they carried with them a weight that she couldn't comprehend. Her dreams were filled with strange, haunting melodies, and every time she woke up, her heart would race. The music was no longer just something she controlled. It was controlling her. One evening, as she sat in her apartment, her fingers on the piano keys once again, Emma heard a knock on the door. She hesitated, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find Mark standing there, a serious look on his face. "Emma," he said, his voice urgent. "I need to talk to you. It's about what happened. I've been doing some digging, and I think you need to know the truth." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. "What do you mean?" Mark stepped into the room, glancing over his shoulder as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "There's a lot more to this than we've been told. And I think you're in real danger." Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her life was spiraling out of control. The music, once a strange curiosity, was now a constant presence in her life, invading her every thought, her every action. She had tried to ignore it. She had tried to bury it, but it was always there, like a shadow, lurking at the edges of her consciousness, demanding to be heard. Every time she closed her eyes, every time she sat down at the piano, it was there, calling her, pulling her into its depths. The worst part was that she no longer had control over it. The music had taken on a life of its own, and she was merely its vessel. She didn't know what to do anymore. How could something so beautiful, so pure, cause such a storm inside her? What did it all mean? Mark's words echoed in her mind, "I think you're in real danger." Danger? From music? From something that was a part of her? She couldn't make sense of it. But when he had looked at her, his eyes wide with fear, she knew he wasn't joking. He knew something she didn't. That evening, Emma found herself sitting in front of her piano once again. She hadn't planned to play, but somehow, her fingers moved of their own accord, brushing lightly against the keys. It was as though the music was coaxing her to continue, urging her to give in. With a sigh, Emma let her hands fall onto the keys. The first few notes were soft, hesitant, as though the music was testing her once more. But soon, it grew louder, more powerful, until her fingers were dancing across the keys with a speed and grace that felt alien to her. And then, it happened. The melody, which had been nothing more than a random assortment of notes, suddenly shifted. It became clear, distinct, and purposeful. It was a song that Emma didn't recognize, a song that seemed to resonate deep within her, as though it was familiar in a way she couldn't explain. The notes echoed in the room, swirling around her, wrapping themselves around her thoughts, her emotions. But as the music filled the space, so did a strange feeling. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The temperature seemed to drop, and a chill ran through her veins. It was as if something, or someone, was watching her. Emma stopped playing, her fingers hovering above the keys, her breath caught in her throat. She turned her head toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. There was a sound. Faint at first, then growing louder. A knock. Slow. Steady. She froze. No one ever came to visit her at this hour. She didn't have any close friends who would drop by unannounced. Clara had been the last one to come over, and that had been days ago. Who could it be? Her mind raced, her pulse quickening. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, pretending she wasn't home. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. She could feel the weight of it in her bones, as though the very sound carried some unseen force. With a trembling hand, Emma stood up from the piano and slowly walked toward the door. She tried to steady her breath, but it felt like the air was closing in around her. Her fingers brushed against the doorknob, and for a moment, she hesitated. What if it was Mark? What if he had found out something more, something important? She opened the door. Standing there, bathed in the dim light of the hallway, was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his face obscured by the shadows. His presence was imposing, yet there was something almost familiar about him, as though she should know who he was, but she couldn't place it. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, her voice shaky. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He didn't look frightened. He didn't look like someone lost or in need of help. He looked like someone with purpose, someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I've been watching you." Emma recoiled, a knot forming in her stomach. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've been playing the piano. I felt it. I knew it was you." Emma's mind raced. Who was this person? How did he know what had been happening to her? "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied quickly, trying to back away, but the man reached out and grabbed her wrist, holding her firmly. "You're not alone in this," he said, his voice a mere whisper now. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." "What are you talking about?" Emma demanded, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Let go of me." The man's grip tightened for a moment before he released her, stepping back into the shadows. "There are others like you," he said, his voice growing colder. "People who can control music like you do. People who have power, great power. And there are those who would do anything to possess it." Emma felt her legs go weak, and she leaned against the doorframe for support. "Who are you? Why are you telling me this?" The man's eyes softened, just for a moment. "Because you're in danger," he said. "And you need to know what you're up against." With those final words, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the hallway. Emma stood frozen. For a long moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Her heart was racing, and her mind was reeling. What was this man talking about? Who were these people he spoke of? And why had he come to her? She closed the door slowly, leaning against it as she tried to process what had just happened. But the questions kept piling up. The music. The strange man. The warning. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of her control. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face, his words echoing in her mind, "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." She tried to make sense of it all, but the more she thought, the more confused she became. She had never asked for any of this. She had never wanted the power that the music seemed to grant her. And yet, it was undeniable, it was real, and it was a part of her. The music was a force, a presence, something she couldn't escape. But now, she knew there was more. There were others. People who had the same power. And some of them were dangerous. The next morning, Emma called Clara. She needed answers. She needed someone who could help her make sense of everything. She couldn't go on like this, not without understanding what was happening to her. When Clara answered, Emma didn't waste any time. "Clara, I need you to listen to me. Something happened last night. Someone came to my door. He knew about the music. He said I wasn't the first, that there are others like me, and that I'm in danger." Clara's voice faltered. "Emma, this is bigger than we thought." "I don't know what to do," Emma confessed, feeling the weight of the fear settle deeper into her chest. "I don't want this power. I don't want to be involved in whatever this is." Clara paused for a moment before speaking again, her voice quieter now. "I think we need to find out more. We need to find out who these people are. And what they want with you." Emma couldn't escape the feeling that the world was closing in on her. The music, the strange man's warning, the haunting realization that she wasn't alone in this, everything was converging into something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. It was no longer just a personal struggle, no longer just the echoes of music in her mind. Now, it was a fight for control. A fight for her own identity. And Emma wasn't sure she was ready for it. She had tried to bury the truth, to ignore the warnings, to pretend that everything was normal. But the more she tried to avoid it, the more it consumed her. The music had become a constant force in her life, pushing, pulling, demanding to be heard. She could no longer deny it. And as much as she wanted to, she couldn't escape it. The truth was undeniable, the music was powerful. It had the potential to change everything. But Emma was beginning to understand that it came at a price. What if it wasn't just the music she had to fear? What if it was the people who were seeking it, the ones who were willing to do anything to possess it? Clara had been her only anchor throughout this storm. When Emma had shared the details of her mysterious visitor, Clara's response had been unwavering. They needed to find out more. The sense of urgency had settled deep in both of them. The unknown had become something much darker, something that threatened to engulf them both. Emma had been hesitant at first, unsure whether to dive deeper into the mystery. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was no turning back. She couldn't live with this looming over her head, not knowing what was happening. She had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. The two of them spent hours researching, poring over old books, journals, and obscure websites, looking for any clue about the mysterious music, the people who could channel it, and the consequences of wielding such power. But the deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. Each piece of information seemed to add weight to the growing sense of dread that had settled over Emma. And then, they found something, a name. A name that sent chills down Emma's spine, the conductor. According to the records they had found, the conductor was a name whispered among those who had power over music. He wasn't just a musician, he was the leader of a secret society of people who could channel music in ways that no one else could. They were called the harmonics, and they were said to have existed for centuries, their power passed down through generations. But what was most unsettling about the conductor was the way he was described. The conductor wasn't just interested in the music, he was obsessed with it. He sought those who had the ability to channel the music, believing that their power was the key to unlocking something far greater. The harmonics were not simply a group of musicians. They were a force, a hidden order with goals that extended far beyond music itself. The more Emma read about the conductor, the more she realized that he wasn't someone she wanted to meet. He was dangerous. And the more she thought about it, the more she understood that he had been watching her all along. She had felt it that night when she played, the eerie sensation that someone was watching, someone who knew exactly what was happening. The conductor had been waiting for her to unlock her potential, to awaken her power. And now that she had, there was no telling what he would do to claim it for himself. As the days passed, Emma began to feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The world she had known, quiet, predictable, simple, was gone. The music had invaded every corner of her life, and with it came the realization that there were forces at play far greater than she could understand. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, as someone who didn't stand out. But now, she was part of something much larger, something that could change the course of her life, and perhaps the world. It was one afternoon when Emma was sitting at her piano, lost in thought, that the doorbell rang again. This time, she didn't hesitate. She knew who it was before she even opened the door. The man from before, the one who had warned her, had returned. With a steady breath, Emma opened the door. The man was standing there, his eyes hidden behind the darkness of his hooded coat. He was calm, almost too calm, as though he knew exactly what was about to unfold. "You've been looking for answers," he said softly, his voice smooth, measured. "But now, you understand that it's too late for questions. You're part of something far bigger than you could have ever imagined." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. "Who are you?" she demanded, stepping back slightly. "What do you want from me?" The man didn't answer at first. Instead, he took a step closer, his gaze piercing through her, as though searching for something deep inside her. "I'm not here to hurt you, Emma," he said, his voice almost kind now. "But you're in danger. You've unleashed something that can't be undone." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? What have I done?" The man's expression softened. "You've played the music, Emma. You've awakened the power within you. And now, the harmonics will come for you. They'll stop at nothing to possess what you have. They'll use you, control you, and in the end, they'll break you." Emma stumbled back, fear creeping into her bones. She hadn't realized the full extent of what she had done. She had thought that playing the piano was just a strange fluke, an accident, but now she understood that it had been a trigger. She had tapped into something that couldn't be undone, something that was too dangerous to be left unchecked. The man stepped forward again, his face now illuminated by the soft light of the hallway. "You're not the first," he said, his voice low and steady. "There have been others before you. But none of them were strong enough to fight back. None of them could control it. But you have a chance." Emma's mind was spinning. A chance? A chance for what? The man's eyes darkened. "A chance to take control of your power. A chance to stop the conductor. A chance to save yourself." For the first time, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe there was a way for her to take control of the music, to stop the conductor and the harmonics from using her. But the man's next words shattered that fragile hope. "You'll have to make a choice, Emma," he said, his voice cold now. "You can keep running, keep hiding, but they will find you. Or you can come with me, face the conductor, and take control of your power." Emma stood still, her heart racing. She had never wanted any of this. She had never asked for this power, and now it seemed that it was her only way to survive. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm not strong enough." The man nodded, his face softening again. "You are. But you must choose, Emma. If you don't, you'll be consumed. And if you're consumed, there's no turning back." Emma's mind raced as the man's words echoed in her thoughts. If you're consumed, there's no turning back. The weight of his warning pressed heavily on her chest. She could feel the air in the room growing thick, almost suffocating. The choice she faced was monumental: fight or run. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about the power inside her, the force that had been awakened, and the danger that loomed just beyond her door. For a moment, Emma stood there, frozen, unable to move, as the man continued to watch her, his eyes dark with unspoken knowledge. Every part of her screamed to escape, to run away from whatever dark fate awaited her. But there was no escaping now. The music had already chosen her, and whether she liked it or not, it was a part of her, something that had to be embraced, controlled, or destroyed. "Why me?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel the tremor in her own hands as she clasped them tightly together. The man didn't answer immediately. He took a step forward, his gaze steady. "Because you are the key. You have the power, Emma, and the conductor knows it. He's been searching for someone like you for years, someone who can channel music in ways no one else can. You felt it, haven't you? The way it consumes you, the way it controls you?" Emma nodded, her throat tight. "I never wanted this," she said, her voice breaking. "I never asked for any of this." The man's expression softened. "I know. But it's not about what you wanted. It's about what's been given to you. The question now is whether you will control it, or let it control you." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. It was hard to think. Hard to focus. All she could hear was the music. The haunting melody that played in the back of her mind, the rhythm that seemed to pulse through her veins. It wasn't just a song. It was a part of her. And now, it seemed to be calling her to something much bigger. "I don't know if I can fight this," Emma admitted, her voice filled with doubt. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." The man reached out, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you know, Emma. But you need to make a choice. If you stay here, hiding from your power, it will destroy you. But if you face it, if you embrace it, you can change everything." She felt a surge of emotion rise within her, fear, anger, confusion, but also a spark of something else, hope. Maybe there was a way to take control of this. Maybe there was a way to stop the conductor, to stop the harmonics from using her. The power inside her wasn't just a curse. It could be a weapon, a force for good, if she chose to wield it. Emma turned away from the man, her hands trembling as she walked to the piano. She could feel it, the pull. The music inside her, just waiting to be set free. The man was right. She couldn't keep running. She couldn't hide anymore. She had to face what was inside her. And in that moment, Emma made a decision. She wasn't going to let the music consume her. She wasn't going to let the harmonics take control. She would fight. She would take control of her destiny, even if it meant confronting the very power that had terrified her for so long. As she sat down at the piano, her fingers brushed lightly against the keys. She closed her eyes, feeling the familiar chill run through her. But this time, it was different. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't going to let the music take over. She was in control. The first note was soft, tentative. The second note followed, more confident. And then, without warning, the melody began to flow from her hands, fluid, powerful, and purposeful. The music filled the room, swirled around her, and she felt it inside her. Every note, every chord, resonating through her very soul. But something was different this time. The music wasn't just an escape. It wasn't just something that controlled her. This time, Emma was controlling it. The notes were hers. The melody was hers. She wasn't just playing the piano, she was commanding the music, shaping it, bending it to her will. The man stood behind her, watching in silence as Emma played. He could see the transformation happening before his eyes. Emma was no longer the frightened, unsure girl who had stumbled into this power by accident. She was becoming something else, something more. She was becoming the conductor of her own fate. And just as the music reached its peak, the door burst open. Standing in the doorway was a figure Emma recognized immediately, the conductor. He was tall, his presence almost magnetic, and there was an undeniable air of authority about him. His eyes locked onto Emma, and for a moment, she felt her heart stop. This was it. The moment she had been dreading. The moment everything would change. "You think you can control it?" The conductor's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "You think you can stop me?" Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could feel it now, the music, the power, the strength that had been buried deep inside her for so long. She was no longer afraid. She had taken control. And she wasn't going to let the conductor take it from her. With a final surge of energy, Emma's fingers flew across the keys, and the music intensified. The air seemed to shimmer with the force of it. The conductor took a step back, his eyes widening in disbelief. "No," he shouted, his voice strained. "You can't do this. You don't understand what you're playing with." But Emma didn't listen. She played harder, faster, pushing the music to its limits. The power surged through her, filling the room, the house, and her very being. She was no longer just a vessel for the music. She was the music. And she was going to stop him. With a final, thunderous chord, the music exploded out of her, sending a shockwave through the room. The conductor staggered back, his face contorted in shock and fury. He tried to raise his hands, to summon his own power, but it was too late. The music had already consumed him. And then, in an instant, it was over. The room fell silent. Emma sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The music, once a force that had controlled her, was now something she could control. And the conductor? He was gone. Defeated. The man who had guided her stood behind her, his expression unreadable. "You did it," he said softly. "You took control." Emma stood up from the piano, her legs unsteady. The weight of what had just happened began to sink in. She had done it. She had faced her fear, embraced her power, and defeated the very force that had sought to control her. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The harmonics were still out there. And there would be others who would try to take what she had. But now, Emma knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. "You're free," the man said, his voice full of admiration. "You've chosen your path. You've taken control of your destiny." Emma nodded, her mind already racing with what lay ahead. The music was hers now. And as long as she could control it, she would never again be afraid. As she looked out the window, the sun was rising, casting its light on a new day. A new beginning. She had won. And this time, she was in control.